Good afternoon, everyone. It's a real pleasure to bring together the second lunchtime webinar in ATSE's Beyond the Bite series, as you can see on the slide. And today we'll be talking about biologicals, a glimpse into the future. Before I begin, I would like to extend my acknowledgement to the traditional custodians of the land from which I am speaking today, the Mianjin country, the Turrbal and the Yagara people, and also extend my sincere and warm acknowledgement to the custodians of the lands from which all of you are joining. If you are having your lunch today, I'd like you to think for a moment about the food in front of you. It's a lunchtime series. Journey from paddock to plate, farm to fork, fork to farm, very important journeys on the planet. And when we think of food now, clean, green, safe, sustainable. But achieving that future is not simple. Farmers are being asked to produce more food under constraints, geopolitics, supply chains. I can go on the list, and under greater climate pressure, fewer resources, growing expectations on environmental stewardship, on food safety, on sustainability. In Australia alone, we spend $4.5 billion annually on ag chem products and pesticides. Now, this highlights the scale, the challenge, but it also highlights the opportunity ahead to develop safer, smarter, and more sustainable alternatives. Biologicals, we must understand, they're not simply about replacing one tool with another. It is about rethinking, a new way of thinking, from biopesticides to biostimulants to microbials to RNA-based innovations. It's about that precise, more targeted, more adaptive, and more aligned with nature. I'll be remiss if I don't speak about RNA in my opening remarks. It's my love for RNA over the past decade. I've had the privilege of pioneering RNA-based approaches, co-invented the BioClay platform. And what is now exciting is that this work has reached a point where I'm looking at an agricultural RNA manufacturing and innovation hub in Australia, where we can move beyond discovery to sovereign manufacturing, enabling regulation, policy frameworks that deliver impacts across our food, feed, fiber, and native crop systems. So just when we talk about a glimpse into the future, I feel we are not talking just about something really far away. We are talking about something much closer, a future that is already there on our doorsteps or is already emerging, but not yet maybe fully realized. So the question for this conversation today will be not whether biologicals have potential. The question is, how do we scale them? How do we build trust? How do we ensure they reach the farm and deliver value? An opportunity of how we bring it all together. So I am really pleased that I have an awesome panel today to share their perspectives across the full ecosystem. We have Louise Thatcher. She is the principal research scientist at CSIRO Ag and Food based in Canberra, where she leads the biopesticide science area. And she brings deep expertise from research on how biologicals are advancing through discovery and validation. We have Ian Kaur from Corteva Agri-Science joining us as well. If we can have the spotlight on Ian, yes. So he is the Asia Pacific Disease Control and Biological Segment Leader, Corteva Agri-Science, has over 20 years of experience in ag innovation and tech, and he'll be sharing with us an industry perspective on how biologicals are being integrated into the commercial systems. Very lucky to have Anna join us as well. So Anna, madam, she is the CEO of Crop Capsules, farmer and an agronomist with more than 30 years of hands-on field experience. A wonderful company, and I've been reading about it, working at the cutting edge of translating innovation into real-world scalable solutions. And finally, we are really privileged to have Pam join us, co-founder and executive chair of Invasive Species Corporation. If I have to read Pam's bio, we'll be here for 1 hour talking only about that. She has spent 30 plus years career focused on biological products for pest management and plant health. True pioneer in this space. really has provided absolute, information and stewardship in shaping the industry globally. So very pleased to have you and look forward to hearing on the global landscape of biologicals from you. So please join me in welcoming the panel. Just a bit of housekeeping. If you have questions, there is a Q&A tab in the Zoom chat. Please post your questions there. At the end of all the 4 talks, we will strive to answer those questions live. If we can't, if we run out of time, we will answer them, post some answer responses to you. If you have any feedback or comments, then that you can post in the chat. So I will hand over to you, Louis, first, talking about research and translation platform for biologicals.
Thank you, Nina, and ATCE for this opportunity to speak today. Really exciting area. So as Nina said, I'm just going to give a bit of a snapshot around research and translation platforms for biologicals and largely focus on crop protection. That's my background. Now, I don't want to scare you with that twirling little flicker there, but the real zombie apocalypse isn't fungi killing people, it's fungi killing our crops. And what we're finding is a lot of the efficacy of our traditional chemical controls is being lost as fungal pathogens of crops develop resistance against these products. And it's not just one fungal pathogen against one fungicide, but there's some cases of fungal pathogens developing resistance to multiple fungicides. It doesn't stop there. We know insect pests are also prone to resistance development. This is just a snapshot in Australia of green peach aphid insecticide resistance across our states. And then we also know with weed control, we get development of herbicide resistance. Now, what does this tell us? I guess it tells us that we need to develop more robust and sustainable integrated pest and disease management systems. We also need more novel modes of action to counteract the resistance development. But what else do we need? We need a diverse toolkit that protects the efficacy of the current chemistries we have. But we also need new tools that address some of the other gaps and needs in grower practices, like where some chemistries may not be available, such as due to withholding periods or residues. We also need new modes of action to counter the fact that there is a slowing in new chemical modes of action being discovered. As Nina also mentioned at the beginning, we need to address global cause for increased ecosystem diversity and health and reducing imports into farming systems. We'd also like our growers to have products that have reduced risks of regulatory bans or changes to label use patterns, so they don't have to learn how to keep using new products all the time. And for Australia and other countries that are highly export orientated, we need to make sure that how we produce our food and fibre can be exported to overseas markets. And so biological-based solutions are really here to help address some of these challenges in our farming systems. I'll just touch point in Australian focus, some of the challenges for adoption of biologicals. In Australia, we are a smaller market just generally for pesticides, and then that flows through to biologicals. We also have a limited number and diversity of biopesticides registered. So this means there's less available tools for our growers to be able to use. So that's a real bottleneck in our system. As a unique ecosystem, a flora and fauna, we also have strict quarantine, and so there can be import restrictions on bringing in certain products, particularly living products. So that also highlights the need to increase our sovereign bioproduction capability, which Nina touched on. We are a large country. Therefore, it means there are broad climates that we grow crops. We'll have different types of pests and diseases, and also a broad distribution network. That can bring some challenges in terms of the need for products, their shelf life and stability. We're also dominated by broad acre cropping at large scales. So the need for products that can be seamlessly integrated into those systems. That has led to traditional chemistries being the go-to choice. However, we know that in Brazil, with their broadacre cropping, biologicals are really mainstream now. So how do we learn from that system? In cases where a biological product is not registered for a certain use through our APVMA regulatory system, sometimes growers may use these unregistered products, and when they don't work, they think, oh, this is a biological, it didn't work, that means all biologicals don't work. Now, that's not the case. That comes down to often a lack of understanding of how to use the product or where it's best appropriately used. And also understanding how to use different types of biological products is a broad system. But there are many opportunities for us, particularly as a scientist. So the research opportunities need to start with scientists working closely with growers in industry from the start, not waiting until you've found a new strain or a new molecule. Work with them at the beginning. Otherwise, you may find you've wasted your time. We need to expand our technologies and types of products, particularly those that are suited to Australian conditions, and also in some cases different pests and diseases that we have in Australia compared to overseas. We need to develop a scientific understanding of the biology of the product and the crop to achieve consistent field performance. So as I said before, biologicals don't necessarily fail because it's a bad product. It's because we don't have the necessary understanding of when to appropriately use it. This sometimes comes down to choosing the best type of biological product for the need. If we think of a living product, like a microbe, it can come with some complexities in terms of being able to deliver that living microbe. It has to survive, colonize, and outcompete others in the system, but it can bring diverse modes of actions and real benefits to the farm. We can simplify that, though, by looking at an extract from that living product that does come with reduced complexity, or we can purify the product further to reduce the complexity. In that essence, it becomes more familiar to what a grower may be currently using in their system. In some cases, we can even go down to generating, I guess, a nature-inspired synthetic. Now, why that does push us down a different regulatory pathway, it can bring a new mode of action to the farming system. We also need to develop field protocols and performance indicators that are built for biologicals, not a system that's based off traditional chemistries. We know that biological products often work in different ways to chemistries, and that's their real value. But in saying that, then we need to have appropriate ways of measuring how they work and their efficacy. We also need to look at some social science opportunities, particularly around harmonising global regulatory systems. That can then, we can work together in a coordinated fashion to get more of these products into growers' hands. There's also some real opportunities I see in formulation. As I said, we've come from farming systems developed around chemistries and formulation technology developed for those chemistries. Now we need new formulations developed for the different types of biologicals. There's also opportunities to develop new tools and precision delivery tools so we can deliver the product when and where needed. And then the last really important part is working with growers in terms of understanding how to best integrate these products into their farming system. And so just a quick example of what we're doing at the CSIRO is looking at developing new biological products to manage pests, weeds and diseases, along with those tools and practices needed by growers and advisors. And this really spans from discovery, improvement, through to on-farm deployment. And so that could be new microbes or strains, molecules, or understanding how they work, really through to deploying these on farm and capturing not just the in-season control of a pathogen or pest, but looking at the longer-term farming systems benefits that come from integrating a biological, such as better resistance management or better ecosystem services, say from beneficial insects. And this is just an example of some of the work we're doing in that discovery and improvements space, using microbial collections that are adapted to Australian farming systems and looking at isolation of novel crop protection products. And just on the right, if you wanted to take a snapshot, is some of the deployment work that we've been doing with our colleagues in New Zealand and the US, really looking at how we start to integrate these biological products into different farming systems from horticulture through to broadacre. So I'll leave it there, Nina. I hope I've given a quick overview and happy for people to reach out at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Louise. We'll keep the time on track. Over to you, Ian, to take us through some of those industry and commercial perspectives.
Perfect, thank you. Hopefully my screen will come up here now. Confirm you can see it, and I'll get started.
Yes, we can. Thank you, Ian.
Perfect. Thank you. So, yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk today. Obviously, flowing on for that, a lot of themes in common here. Our role at Corteva, we are a seed crop protection and biologicals company, so really focused on the developing and commercialization of solutions for agriculture and including biologicals. We do our own discovery, but also do a lot of partnership. So I guess to simplify how we look at it is, when we're launching any product, we really look at it about grower benefit, and a lot of that will come down to yield. There's other factors as well, but this is sort of a good snapshot of the equation that amounts to yield and grower benefit. So genetics and that has been the original sort of green revolution, starting in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and really about increasing the genetic potential of the plant. And we still spend a lot of money. Probably the most significant amount globally is still spent on genetics and trying to improve the genetic potential. Management is the other part that has had a lot of investment over the years, which is improvements in cultural practices, irrigation, that sort of crop husbandry, and a lot of crop protection. And certainly through the 90s to the 2000s, a lot of investment and new modes of action for crop protection. Environment until then has been something that's always been considered in the equation, and we try and manage for it. But really something that has not had as much focus historically. And now, as we're sort of slowing down the gain on both genetics and, as you heard, the discovery of new crop protection products is becoming longer and harder to do. So the focus on the environment that is getting increasingly more hostile, and the biota especially, is really important to how we continue to manage improving yield and quality and market access as well. So when we look at it, we sort of say, let's break it down into its essence: boosting performance, trying to activate that plant to interact with its environment to make the best potential that you can get out of that genetic potential that you put into the investment. And this actually is a fairly well-established market in biologicals. Rhizobium that inoculate legume roots, which help it fix nitrogen in the soil, is a very old and probably still one of the most significant parts of biologicals globally. Mycorrhiza, which we're investing more in, and bacterial extracts for really boosting and activating that plant to help get the most out of the environment. Building resilience is another emerging area that biologicals are playing an increasing role in. So plant growth regulators and how we stimulate the plant to overcome periods of intense adverse environmental conditions. And this is really booming, and a lot of investment put into this space globally to try and mitigate the effects of climate change and stresses that are coming on the plant. And protect potential, this is the other part that is really talking about biologicals as a potential control agent, similar to crop protection. And again, that is established, but really taking off now in conjunction with crop protection. So the drivers are certainly in place. What's sort of changing for us now, and why the investment is becoming much more attractive is the ability for us to advances in science. As we just touched on, a lot of investment going on in these spaces, a lot of people coming up with technology breakthroughs of isolating not just the natural pathway, but what the extract is and how we can efficiently use it. Breakthroughs in DNA, RNA, and those sorts of understanding of what's actually happening in the environment, as well as the processes and diversity of where these solutions are coming from has grown significantly. Resistance management's been touched on already, and this is actually probably a really key point in that this does not replace crop protection. It is all about the synergy of how we can make the whole toolkit sort of bigger and more robust. I mean, for a crop protection synthetic molecule, it now costs about $300 million and between 7 to 8 years to develop. So if the plants and the diseases and the insects are evolving resistance quicker than that, it becomes very hard to replace that with both the investment and the time required at the right place. So making sure that there's complementary modes of action and supporting natural systems, stimulating the plant to help be in a healthier place to defend itself. These are really important to being able to ensure food security and make sure that there's a resilient system for growers to invest in and get a return from. Sustainability was touched on, despite what some of the media portrays. Farmers genuinely wanting to do better by their farm and obviously multi-generational in many cases, and pass down the land better in a better condition than they found it. And a lot of realization that not just for macroeconomics, but really for the benefit of the environment, the need to get more efficiency out of nutrients and out of water to make sure that that the environment is not overly taxed. So trying to lower the loading of all of those inputs is a real driver pushing biologicals as well. And market access, we talked about that as well. Some markets moving to pesticide residue free and trying to increase the quality and consistency of products for marketability. So all of those drivers have really triggered an investment in biologicals at this stage. And as I said, we don't see it as a replacement for crop protection. It's another tool in the toolbox, and a growing tool. The biologicals are estimated to make up about 25% of the overall crop protection market by 2035, coming from a much lower base, sort of below 10% today. And a lot of this is going to be around demonstrating the benefit and working through some of the challenges that we've got, and very aligned with Louise on what some of these are. From our point of view, regulatory is a very complex matter, and it really changes the investment thesis in how long it might take, how that product is categorized, especially when we're investing now with potentially not launching for sort of 5 to 7 years. So a changing regulatory environment can be very challenging for us, especially when we're talking about, again, some of what was spoken about earlier is if you're not using the actual biological product and you're using an extract, does that change how it's regulated, etc.? So some challenges there. Supply chain, and when I'm talking about supply chain, I'm really talking about our own supply chain. So we need to try and fit in with the ecosystem that is there today for farm inputs. So good shelf life, good storage and freight. Refrigerated products are problematic in many countries and add a lot of cost. Packaging, making sure the packaging is suitable for the material and doesn't pose an environmental problem at the other end, which is a consideration. They're also quite technically difficult to manufacture. Sterility is a big part when you're dealing with natural products at scale. You don't want another molecule. I think it's like giant home brew sometimes. So if you get an infection, it's really problematic. And trying to get a consistent output of the actual microbe you're targeting can be complicated as well. And we touched on formulation, which is a big investment to try and make it more robust, more compatible with what's going on. Also more support, and others will touch on this as well. We're doing a lot of on-the-ground trials to help people understand when and how to use them. They're not as robust as crop protection, synthetic crop protection molecules that are very, we say they work 90% of the environments 90% of the time. And that's not the case with biologicals. They're more sensitive to externalities, and we have to really hold people's hands through that and doing a lot of trial work there. And they need to fit inside the current infrastructure. You know, it's a high efficient market, so a lot of people are managing ground that is extensive, and they can't afford something that is too additional to what they're doing, because they don't have the time, and often they don't have the resources. So the solution has to go on at the same timing and be incorporated into their overall production system without too much sort of complexity or cost. So these are very much all linked, and you know, I guess the summary really is, for us, some of the hurdles are still, the investments are quite large, and the gross cost to the grower needs to still be very competitive with synthetic crop protection to try and drive that adoption that we're looking for. So those are probably some of the challenges. We have been actually in this space for quite a while. This is one of our fermentation facilities in the USA, and I probably dropped it in there for some of the engineers just to see the sort of scale that we are doing fermentation on. And these facilities are, as I said, very complex. You want to make sure they're very sterile, and again, as I said, they do require unique sort of capabilities. I know this one has two gas turbines. Like aeration is very important, so two gas turbines and compressors, so 100,000 CFM of air capacity, just to try and keep the fermentation constant and steady. So a whole lot of unique challenges, and others will probably talk about the adoption as well. So as we said, always open to questions and points of interest if anyone has any, but I'll hand over.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. And just to everyone attending, if you have questions, please post them in the Q&A, and we'll strive to answer them. And hopefully we can make up some time. Anna, over to you.
Hi, I'm Anna. I'm a farmer, and I work on a broadacre situation. So I'm going to be referring to broadacre or open cropping systems, so large scale. A lot of what is in my presentation has already been mentioned, so I will skip through a little bit to try and make up some time. So I guess what is driving farmer uptake to biologicals in Australia? We've already heard about increased resistance to existing products. For example, in the cotton industry, we have 6 modes of action for the two-spotted mite, 2 of which are showing 0 resistance, and they have some unique use issues and also some supply issues. So you can see we're really looking towards biologicals to try and support the extension of the life of those products, of those modes of actions that are showing resistance, and support growers in to get to the next stage, I guess, of the next to maintain the products they've got, and also any products that are coming onto the market. We have reduced access to traditional products. So these products are under review constantly, and as it has already been mentioned, the development process coming through the pipeline is really long, and there's very few coming through. So we also have market and trade expectations. Australia's reputation is for green, clean, ethically produced food and fibre, and to meet the domestic and international maximum residue levels, we need to be really considering what we're using, and that's where biologicals may, not always, but may play a part in that. And we certainly have our trade is jeopardized when Australia still has registration on some of those products that are banned internationally, and that is coming up with the EU, the new EU system. Changing farmer mindset. So a younger decision makers in particular, they're really curious and curious. They're really innovative and they're motivated, particularly by our diminishing social license to farm. And that's happening globally, not just in Australia. And with tight margins, they're increasingly open to using new tools that support both profitability and sustainability. Oh, my slides have decided to change themselves before me. So consumer demand is one that I haven't heard, but there's a really strong consumer demand for sustainably produced, low input and organic food, which is creating a bit of a pull-through pressure across supply chains to try and introduce new products. And there's also, as mentioned by Louise, the innovation in application technology systems. So technologies that were once considered only available in small scale and closed cropping systems are now being adopted to broadacre use by changing the way we think about how we use the biologicals in a cost-effective and sustainable manner. So a little bit on global perspectives on adoption. In 2020, late 2026, I joined, 2025, sorry, I joined the International Farmer Panel at the annual Biocontrol Industry Meeting to discuss the uptake of biological. And 3 farmers, including myself, shared our experiences. Sylvia emphasised the urgent need for biological products for her farmers. And she's talking micro farmers. But these micro farmers, they produce 80% of the food for Kenya's population, and her system is now going into schools and feeding children low harmful food produced with lower harmful chemicals for lunches at school. So Max from Finland, he admitted to resisting biologicals from the beginning. But after adopting them, he found that he had reduced labour, so more time to himself, improved profitability, and an increased resilience in his really, really challenging farming system, because Finland does not get a lot of sun. And I highlighted the importance of introducing biologicals in a simple and informed manner. So with the critical role of educating our agricultural advisors and to support successful use. So why do biologicals feel different to farmers? I'm very sorry that my slideshow has got a mind of its own and it's changing itself. Biologicals are different because, as already mentioned, typically chemistry relies on a single biological process. It's predictable, it's consistent, and scientifically straightforward. A herbicide, for example, might disrupt a plant's energy system or pathway, and the plant dies. That's really simple and it's very repeatable. However, biologicals often rely on multiple biological processes, and the success of that biological might depend on, for example, actively growing root systems, adequate soil moisture, and a few other climatic conditions at the same time. So it's not simple, and we need to learn those processes and teach farmers how to integrate those processes into their existing systems, because it's a pretty complex thing, farming. The other thing with biologicals is that they work generally best as a proactive or a preventative input in many cases. And we as farmers since the 1950s have largely worked on a reactive basis, a threshold-based decision or framework. And so most farmers up to date have adopted a pretty low-risk mindset. If it isn't broken, why change it? And often change only occurs when it becomes unavoidable. So a few additional barriers to adoption. Risk profile, as mentioned. we require a shift in mindset to remove that reactive uncertainty and change to a proactive management. Limited product availability. This has been discussed, and Australia is a small market. We need to have better regulatory pathways, and there are moves and committees working on that right now. As mentioned, biologicals have higher production costs, and their handling and shelf life constraints prove an additional complexity into the system. But the most important thing with biologicals is about education, about how they work and fitting them into existing systems. How to manage the expectation of the farmer is essential to increase and really, I guess, encourage the adoption of biologicals. I really cannot stress this more, but as Louise said, the farmer is a partner in the development of this. It is really complex being a farmer, and the best way to get the adoption of biological is to be able to simplify the process. For example, if a seed coating will suffice, it is much easier. It is more farmer friendly and less messy and less time consuming than applying a slurry at planting. So our experience, this did actually pop up right at the right time. So the company that we have, Crop Capsules, my husband, the co-founder, my husband Steve, and I have been using Arretmaceras hayati for over a decade to suppress and control the silverleaf whitefly or Burmecia tabaci. We started hand releasing, so when our kids were in bed, we'd sneak out and we'd go and put little vials of insects out in the cotton to help to see if we could get some suppression on silverleaf whitefly, and we worked out that it did work. Well, this was pretty unsustainable, so we moved to a drone system. As demand grew for the hayati, the drones were really falling behind. We just couldn't cover enough area quickly enough, and so Steve, my husband, and I came up with an encapsulation system, which allows the application of Arretmaceras hayati over hundreds of hectares per hour, removing the key limitation of the earlier methods. And this became our flagship product, Cotton Cap. So we noticed early that we got some outcomes that they were varied, and most of them stemmed back to delayed application. And then there was a little bit of confusion about, well, how do I monitor this? So we've come up with what you can see on the screen as a cotton cap monitoring guide. So what that guide does, it's a decision support tool to align growers and decision makers with critical periods during the season after when to apply cotton cap and when to monitor. So I guess biologicals do offer an enormous potential for sustainable, resilient farming systems, but adoption requires integration into a traditional system and education of the decision makers within that. This I cannot emphasize enough, and we have heard that from both of the previous speakers. So as far as strategic partnerships that support biological regulation and adoption, there's a lot of people involved in this space in Australia. As you can see, this is just a select few. And last night, we held a first meeting to try and start a chapter of the International Biocontrol Manufacturers Association to help support the uptake and regulation and come across, we're still in the process of the aims and the scope, ready for the start of this in February. So I'm hoping that we can really start supporting the biological industry in Australia and increasing and improving uptake and understanding of what we do. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Thanks for taking us through that. And last but not the least, over to you, Pam.
Okay, so I'm going to race through these. so we have some time for questions. Okay. So I gave some of these slides at the Salinas Biological Summit, and what's happening in the industry. Well, it's a very dynamic industry with many positives, but surrounded by global economic and political uncertainty and chaos and very low commodity prices in most places. But the many companies are managing to launch a lot of new biological products, and I keep seeing more and more announced every week. And the big companies, like you heard from Corteva, and the big fertilizer companies are doing many deals with small companies. And this week announced was a deal with Syngenta and Groundwork Bioag, which is a company that has mycorrhizae from the Israeli desert. And then European investors have been the ones that have been did not get burned in the 22 timeframe in terms of high valuations in biologicals like the US, so are putting money in. And then private equity is still snapping up biological companies. Startups are getting more realistic in what they're doing, and the big worry, as we heard from Ian, is regulatory uncertainty, and there's a lengthening EPA timeline. The European regulations are improving, but still long. Brazil is the best so far. And Dunham Trimmer gives the numbers here, but they've told me that they're probably gonna come off the double digits and be high single digits in their next update, as the commodity prices are suppressed and farmers are not using as many inputs. And the markets are getting a bit mature. And in Brazil, the prices have gone way down, and there's a price war going on in biologicals. So the growth is a little bit less, but still, quite robust. And what they're showing is that Asia will actually really become quite large, and that's driven by China with their own internalized biological system, which is pretty closed right now, but certainly there's a lot of activity going on there. Brazil, as I mentioned, has become quite large and is the largest biologicals market, and mostly in large acre crops, where in the rest of the world it's high value specialty crops. And while inoculants, very well established, of course, used for decades on soybean, rhizobium and bradyrhizobium, while that's the biggest by hectares, it's actually not the biggest in value. And bionematicides have actually are selling now more bionematicides in Brazil than actually chemical nematicides. The investment in this sector is way off by the venture capitalists, and it's really plummeted. It's the worst time in my career and in most people's career that in terms of investment into startups. So that is going to slow innovation a bit. And so, there are not as many startups as a result of that. So there's still only a small portion of microbial diversity, as you heard from Louise, who's working in that area. So we still have companies and a lot of companies working on fixing nitrogen, sequestering carbon, and helping crops take up nutrients more efficiently. There's some companies, I just read another one, and I need to add its logo, that has microbes to reduce crop residue breakdown. And then many in the biocontrol area. Bug Biome is a England company that's focusing on microbes that are on the leaf surface that kill sucking insects, and got the first ever cordyceps from Lallemand and so forth. And then we've even got some amoeba now come to market, extracts, and then cyanobacteria that are coming for dual use. As is dear to Nina, who's working in this area, lots and lots of companies and I'm sure I've missed some of them, for RNAi, but Greenlight is the most advanced and has gotten their first registration for powdery mildew. I think it's powdery mildew in Brazil, and also carload potato beetle and varroa mite, and soon weeds in US. Another very hot area of always are the proteins, peptides, and antibodies companies, and making some progress, although the regulatory system is finally catching up here. But certainly there's new companies. I talked to two in Y Combinator this last week, more peptide companies using AI-driven peptide discovery. So it's getting a bit crowded. And then there's just this is just a very small subset of all the compounds, but what suffice to say is that eliciting compounds that elicit a biological response in a plant for either pest control or drought tolerance or yield improvement is really, really getting a lot of traction. There are these companies that are growing very quickly, and it's using very small amounts of natural compounds to elicit something in a plant, and you're going to see a lot more of that. On the bioherbicide side, well, there's a few companies. They're very diverse and different. Nobody's doing really the same thing. There's still still very early. Three new ones that I've shown here with the stars jumped in and on the and then I should add copper just announced a fungal one that they're commercializing, living fungus. And so we're going to see more coming in the future because new modes of action for resistance management are badly needed. So at the EPA in the US, the emerging technologies branch is handling these new things, these peptides, gene-edited microbes, and RNAi. And the first one did kick out the door of RNAi, and you're going to see more of those. But there's overwhelming number of new innovations waiting approval at the EPA in the biopesticide division with these three branches, and only 9 new chemicals. So there's a mismatch in the actual resources to do all of these, and so timelines are pretty slow. So what's hot? Well, biological chemistry, as I said, artificial intelligence-driven design of peptides and proteins is really quite hot, driven from pharma and moving into ag. I already mentioned low-dose elicitor molecules that trigger a plant response, microbial metabolites, and while might be more challenging regulatory-wise, certainly it helps with some of the issues with living microbes and having more consistency, better field and shelf life than RNA, as I mentioned. Some things and technologies that can truly, with the changing climate, that can truly address abiotic stress, and a lot of hype and things going on in regenerative soils and regenerative farming. But of course, integrated programs, as Ian said, and everyone said, is that the key here is nothing's used standalone. So integrating biologicals into the program is really where it's at, and then formulations that can stabilize and things that can stabilize biologicals, as we heard from our other speakers, new novel formulations that are tailor-made for the particular biologicals. It is crowded. There are a lot of companies. Farmers are overwhelmed with the companies, although the new startups have slowed down because of the lack of venture capital. But companies are getting much better at differentiating. There are still bugs in a jug and bathtub brews, as we heard from some of our other speakers, that muddy the waters with farmers. But the industry is sciencing up, especially on the biostimulant side. And I'll just end with I speak to a lot of farmers. I spoke to at a no-till conference with 500 farmers earlier this year, and we had a number of workshops. And what they say is that every sales rep comes to them with their biological and says, I can give you 5% yield increase or 7% yield increase or whatever it is, and they all come with the same claim of X% yield increase. And then the farmers will say, well, Pam, what questions do I need to ask these companies next? And can you help me with a list of questions that I should ask? And I've come up with a number of them for them. And we heard some from all our other speakers. What is the science behind the product? How does it work? Why? Can the company clearly explain it? What's the data behind the product? Well, how many field trials, and when does it work and when doesn't it work? What's the consistency and win rate, and do you know when it doesn't work? And like if you're talking about multiple strain products, how many strains are in there and why? And sometimes some companies have 300 strains, and like, why do you have so many strains in there and species? And what are they doing? And what is your quality control of the product? And here's just I have other questions, but here's just some of the questions. Still, about the surveys show that about 40% of all farmers still are mystified or haven't tried biologicals. So we still have work to do, but it's getting a little bit better. It used to be 50, and there's more awareness. But we still have certainly, as the other speakers have said, an education curve of how to integrate these products and how to make them work because they do work, but how to maximize them in integrated programs. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pam. And thanks to all the speakers for this, really, really kind of enlightening conversation, taking us and setting the scene of, and it's apparent it's not going to be created by one sector, one discipline, or one technology. It will build through collaboration, as you have all said. So I might switch on to get to some questions. And the first one, maybe if Pam or Ian can answer, what do you think we need to do as an industry to rebuild trust in the VC community?
Yes, that is a good question. Well, because the valuations were so high in that time frame, now the valuations have come down to earth. That's one thing. But I mean, I hear a number of entrepreneurs moan that venture capitalists don't understand biologicals, and it takes longer than it's they've got to be patient. But actually, my challenge to entrepreneurs is that they need to use modern technology to actually accelerate their discovery and development timetables and to be as capital efficient as possible. And that's the key I mean, the investor wants to see capital efficiency and they want to get an exit. So taking 10 years to get to market with a product is too long. Even 7 years is probably too long. How can you get to market in 5 years or less would be my challenge.
Yeah, that was another question as well, Pam, that how do we can't get a microbial under 5-year turnaround for broadacres. So, it just becomes that as well. Ian, any insights from you on building trust in the VC community?
I think Pam covered it very well. I mean, for us, and is we see more use of science, more specific, deep understanding of what that interaction is, and being able to explain it at all levels, so that the farmer can understand it, but also showing that line to value to the VC is going to be key in proving out that technology to a point that VCs will be happy to jump in, and ourselves included, to try and take a risk on that, so we understand exactly what the regulatory pathway is going to be and the probability of technical success. So it is probably more science earlier, to try and get to a really finite point of what's happening is going to build that trust back up again. And I think, as Pam said, more realistic valuations are probably going to help in getting that investment starting again.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe Louis, I'll reach out to you. There's a question there. When a new biological is introduced, we know resistance will emerge with time. Are some of these new products going to last longer in the market? What does your magic mirror says?
The magic mirror says, this is an area we're active in. I guess that, we often think, a biological is going to be less hard to develop resistance against it. And it comes down to, I guess, those different modes of action that are at play. We do know there are studies, and we've done some preliminary studies ourselves, that the natural diversity to biocontrols and other natural products, it exists naturally in pathogen or pest populations. I guess it's what the selective pressure is on that for that adaptation to be maintained in a population. So I think with any good management practice, you need to be rotating different modes of action and understanding selective pressure. It's not a black or white sort of yes, no.
We have to be careful with RNAi and peptides because if they're single modes of action, the pests and pathogens are going to develop resistance. So those two are going to need to be used in integrated programs for sure.
Yeah, true, very true. That mode of action really plays a big part. And then with some of them, and really rightly question, some of them are going to be, subject to the test of time, and we do learn more as we develop more. And so that's kind of an iterative process. I have another question, maybe, and I can throw it to you. Product stewardship, because you have done that for your crop capsules and taken it to success. Where do you think this fits into the adoption pathway? And we are finding application is critical barrier to scaling.
Absolutely. I think, adoption stewardship is crucial. Like you can't expect people to offer them a product and expect them to know how to use it when there's a greater than one biological pathway involved in the success of the product. And just on the resistance management, I mean, this all needs to be an integrated management system so that we can get longevity not only out of our traditional pesticides and products, but out of the biologicals coming onto the market. And so we need to be able to use our rotations and really steward it not just as an introductory stewardship, but as a stewardship of the product as a whole. That's one thing that I do know that we're doing reasonably well in the cotton. We have had to in the cotton industry is steward our products. So knowing when to use them, how to use them, and in what in what order and a rotation to maximize not only the efficacy of that product, but the longevity of that product over time. And integrate it with natural solutions is so important. But yeah, definitely the stewardship of introduction and education, so vital. You just can't grow a business without educating for your growers, your end users, about the product that you're selling them.
Thank you very much. So a last one thrown at all of you, and I really squirm when I'm on the other side of the panel when I get this question. So I thought I'll take this on. Like, what is that one thing, 3 words, 5 words, we must do to unlock the potential of biologicals? Starting with you, Louise.
Unlock the potential. I'm going to say improve what we already have. And that could be taken in different ways in terms of integration or improving the product itself.
Thank you. Thank you. Ian.
Build trust. I think that's what it comes down to for me. I think the more people trust and understand these products, the more value we'll be able to unlock at that grower level, and that'll flow through the whole chain.
Thank you. Anna.
I think there's 2 things: keeping the cost low, but also really pinning down that return on investment. It might not just be the what you're trying to achieve; it might be the roll-on and the flow-on effects of the use of that product.
Thank you so much. Pam.
We need more systems integrators to help the farmer integrate them properly, and education.
Great insights, and really, yeah, and it's evident, we are on a journey together, and that journey will lead to potential outcomes, as we have all discussed. So please join me in thanking the panel for this wonderful conversation and giving you that food for thought for your lunch, but also for the future food systems as they emerge. Thank you once again to all the panelists, and please do keep on track with these webinars. The next ATSE webinar will be happening in September, and so we will reach out to you as and when we have more information available.